Stellaris is a very complicated game played by equally complicated people, and there's a lot of weird and obscure things to talk about. So here's the Stellaris Iceberg Explained. Tip of the iceberg: Stellaris is developed by a bunch of Swedes, released in 2016. Paradoxically, it's actually developed by the Paradox Development Studio, not Paradox Interactive, while at the same time being under the same company, which is Paradox Interactive. And yes, you're probably just as confused as I am. This was a time when there were no alloys, no restriction for ship slots, and planet tiles. The very thing Stellaris boomers talk about on how this game fell off, while still buying all of the newer DLCs due to crippling game addiction. Back then, your territory can only be expanded using stations, which basically puts a circle marking if something is yours or not, and this can overlap, making for multiple ownership of a singular system in both space and planets, which usually results in very strange sovereignty disputes of who owns what. It's rather realistic. But you know what's not realistic? If you've heard of the infamous Red Laser Corvette meta, you're eligible for the Senior Citizen card, because back then in the prehistoric era, you just spam the most basic ship with the most basic weapons, and nothing else. For some insane reason, lower tier weapons were more cost efficient compared to higher tier ones. This led to a ridiculous situation where you just never research any military text and run around with basically floating ship frames, carrying some red lasers. So yeah, after that got patched, there was something else that stayed: armor blocking damage in a percentage-based system. On the other hand, shields just gave flat HP, which was always worthless. This led to a new meta of full armor battleships, which by the way only takes like 20% of the damage from everything when blinged out with max armor. It was just ridiculous, which then got countered by plasma only ships, since it's literally the only thing in the game that cuts through armor even with all the damage reductions. It was a very strange time to say the least. Oh, and back then, auras actually have a radius within the system instead of being applied globally system-wide. So if you're too close to a station, you might get jammed. But if you move away, you're fine. Same for buffs. If there's a regen aura and you're too far, you might not get any regen at all. So pre 2.0, you don't start with all the 3 weapon types. Instead, you started with one of the 3 and need to research the other 2. Railguns and red lasers were roughly even, but nuclear weapons sucked very badly. They had range but delayed impact, combined with lower DPS in a version of the game with no disengage and a heavily punishing manual retreat system. So in practice, they hit last, hit slower, and everyone else was more or less on no retreat permanently. This led to, well, a slugfest of just, again, red lasers. Maybe railguns too if you're feeling spicy. What about the drive types? Back then, they were weird. When you create an empire, you can choose your starting drives. There were 3 of them, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. Of course, they were horribly unbalanced and sometimes just outright useless. For example, the hyperdrives. We're all familiar with this one. It's the drive where you use hyperlanes to move through the stars. Now, what are its advantages? Nothing. What about its weaknesses? Yes. Look, okay, it's just so bad. The other 2 drive types basically don't even care one bit about hyperlanes. Warp drives are literally just bootleg jump drives on game start. That's literally what those things were. Extremely reliable in all situations, with its only weakness being the fact that it's a little slow to charge up, while wormhole drives straight up need a wormhole station as an anchor to move around. It's faster and longer range than warp, but with a giant weakness of having to be spammed everywhere. And enemies can just snipe the wormhole stations, which can render you basically stuck. Still infinitely better than hyperdrives though. As fun fact, it only takes 1 wormhole or warp drive action to snipe your key systems and or planets, while you may need a dozen hyperdrive actions just to respawn. Even worse when the hyperlanes form a spiral, forcing you you to basically make a choice of either get your planet sniped or not push at all. An Empire 10 times weaker could just screw you over just because you can't even respond. It was just horrible. Oh, and let's talk about a researchable drive called jump drives. Back then, they were just plain insane. Think about jump drives now, but with 0 cooldown and 0 jump penalties. You could literally jump snipe everyone in the galaxy in quick succession, and there was literally nothing anyone can do about it. Worst part is, there weren't any markets to patch up the gaping holes in your economy. That wasn't a feature yet. So, if you're in a deficit of anything from a jump snipe, prepare to just death spiral to oblivion. People don't understand sometimes how huge the addition of the market is, as it prevents minor deficits from killing you outright. Against wormhole empires though, just send jump drive corvettes, kill all of their wormhole stations, and you just auto win. For the uninformed, jump drives are just an advanced drive type any empire can research, but it requires a lot of tech even for tall empires. Sometimes it's not even possible for white empires due to the severe tech penalties you get from having many planets from the old admin cap system. There were a lot of weird happenings back then. Here's a funny tidbit. Worker bonuses used to apply twice to slaves on top of existing bonuses. This led to a situation where something slaver guilds is just the meta. It was just genuinely absurd. Since slaver guilds enable specialist slaves on game start, you can literally do this by rushing domination on year 5, enable extended shifts, and just absolutely roll in resources everywhere. Now, surprisingly, this isn't the most broken build available yet, as there is something even more disgusting. And yep, it's just Slaver Guild's Shattered Ring. Back then, you can actually rush a research segment and not even have to pay the upkeep for it, as clearing the blocker gives you what you need to build the segment and then would adapt your arcane generator to upkeep it for you. If you thought that was bad enough, get this. This also allows you to buy strategic resources on the market, since you technically produce them now. This means freakishly early strategic resource weapon edicts, which boost every aspect of your combat power. You're not even weak in the early game. It's just stupid. On top of that, the single starting ring world can basically carry your tech through the whole game. You literally get multiple times the research, 3 upkeep districts, early weapon edicts, but also 2 ruin ring world segments open. This may not sound like much, but it means higher likelihood of getting mega engineering. Back then, before power creep basically made them irrelevant, it was just ludicrously efficient for a ring world empire to rush megastructure repair to get galactic wonders. Now, of course, this is not the end of it. Admin cap, nonsense. 2 playstyles, 1 game. There's tall and there's wide. Tall meaning a build with less of everything but with higher efficiency, and wide being a build that focuses on sheer amount of pops and planets but with less efficiency. Admin cap or empire size is basically a mechanic that's created to keep these 2 playstyles roughly equal. But well, this is paradox. There are roughly 3 different ways this was done through the game's lifespan. A long time ago, empire size was based on planet count. Very painful for wide playstyles, as the capacity is very low and the penalties were massive. So much so that running a 1 planet challenge is actually viable and not a meme at all back then. Of course, like all things Stellaris, it had to change big time. Sometime later, there was something called admin cap, which was based on jobs. Penalties were harsh, but trivially easy to work around. Just have more pops to add more empire size you can take. Of course, this just made wide broken, since empire size main reason for existing before this was to prevent wide from dominating through sheer amount of scale. What made it worse was people learning that you can just turn the job on and off to get the same benefit. This just led to a very confusing confusing set of shenanigans that was frankly tedious, but horrifyingly effective. So yeah, trying to play tall in this era is literally like being thrown into a shark tank. You're just a nice, small meal. And then now, where it's completely unavoidable like in the past, but the effects are significantly lower. I guess because Paradox realized their players enjoy looking at big numbers. And we can actually look at old Stellaris fiascos to see what I mean. Remember when synthetic evolution was wildly overpowered because there were no pop scaling? Yeah, you can easily get thousands of pops without breaking a sweat. Paradox tried to balance this out, but people complained. Wah, Paradox, why you no fun? They ended up backtracking and just adding 2 sliders for that. And something more recent, which is the proposed tech rework. It's basically planning to nuke researchers and, well, tech in general to the ground. Suffice to say, nobody liked it. The community collectively hated it, even when tech is, by all intents and purposes, well, overpowered for so long too. It seems nobody really wanted change. Reverting things to the quote-unquote good old days is always gonna spark unimaginable backlash, so they just don't. Instead, just putting a slider again. Back to admin cap, this time it's basically the middle ground. It cannot be avoided anymore, just like the boomer days. But the penalties are significantly reduced and some empires just don't even care about it. It's not as bad as before, but wide still dominated tall in all aspects. But alas, I guess that's what many people wanted. So I think it's here to stay. Now, to illustrate the absurdities of old Stellaris, imagine a tall versus wide empire. The tall empire has 1 main planet and 10 other planets as 1 planet vassals, while the wide empire has all 11 planets under their control. Who would win? Obviously the one with 1 planet. So apparently, the domination tree used to make vassals give half of their naval cap to their overlords. So if you pick the naval cap ascension perk combined with releasing a bunch of vassals, you can basically make it so that each vassal give you a ludicrous amount of naval cap for basically no cost. Because when you release a vassal, it duplicates every aspect of your empire. Civics, ethics, tax, traditions, and you guessed it, even ascension perks. As a result, you might have double or even quadruple the naval cap of a white player. If that's too much, you have the option of making some of them a tribute, giving you resources instead of naval cap. Not to mention the tech difference from lack of penalties, and of course, basically infinite naval cap. It just results in 1 planet empires being the meta. If you thought the recent nonsense from the Overlords DLC was bad, imagine what that's like, but worse. This meme basically explains the reality of old Stellaris.
Everything's crooked. Reality is poison. I want to go back.
Here's some arcane information you've probably never heard of. You might have remembered using your excess food to increase pop growth on individual planets. But have you heard of using excess food to add pop growth on your entire empire? Yes, that's right. For every unit of food you have in excess, it'll boost your growth by a percentage. If you have a food world, pop growth can easily be increased by like 200%. If you're a pacifistic agrarian idol with multiple food worlds, you'd basically have infinite pops and nobody could do anything about it. Never in my Stellaris career would I have thought that I would say pacifists are meta. Thank God this is gone, because holy crap, imagine every Stellaris tournament consisting of fanatic pacifists. Now that would be a sight to see. Or, well, the lack thereof, because nobody can declare war. Here's a fun fact. If you have more than 1 biospecies on the same world, they would both grow at half speed. So you wanted to always keep worlds separated with 1 species each and then restricting migration. This all works well, at least until someone specifically makes an actual invasive species with all the negative traits known to man, only to then send it over to your planets and make them grow everywhere. Forcing parallel pop growth on someone else is apparently somehow possible, but sadly, the specifics of this are lost to time. But maybe you know more and can share it down below. This strategy will likely go down in history as perhaps one of the most arcane in both method and execution. Besides that, back then, there were also more in-depth peace deals. I honestly have no idea why they removed this. It's just a better system. For example, you can request war reparations or even governmental changes using war score you accrue during the war, either from beating them in battle or just doing a little trolling. Basically, like the system in other modern Paradox games, it would make peace deals actually interesting instead of what it is now, which is basically a dumbed down version of keep what you have or hope the other empire is not dumb enough to surrender a winning war. Yes, you heard that right. The UI from back then to now hasn't really changed much. It barely explains to you what you're actually signing. Now, I know you knuckleheads never read the terms of service of anything really, so accidentally signing away your entire empire is a real possibility.
Wait,
You
no, that's the
fool.
wrong one. No!
Here's a much longer example.
Oh, they're everywhere. Oh no, oh no. I gotta call. Should I status quo or should I achieve war goal?
Definitely achieve war goals.
Okay, I trust you. Yes, success. That's what they told me to do. That's what we're gonna do.
Here we go. Let me. Yeah, we'll agree for peace. We have lost a war. Wait, did we just?
You doing alright over there? What happened?
I made a mistake.
Yeah?
Oh yeah, I surrendered. Oh my god! I got baited so bad!
Victory! We won a war! Which one?
Alright, time to talk about some of the most crazy exploits over the years. Funnily enough, most of these are archived by Montu's Stellaris Exploits series. If you want more detail, you should go there. So, are you ready? 3, 2, 1. Go! You used to be able to refund alloys from your starting corvettes. It's only slightly useful when done in the early game. But when you understand the underlying mechanic and scale it up to an entire armada, crazy things can happen with some game-breaking exploits. This is due to the wonky way the game calculates the cost of a ship. When you pay to build a ship, you can get discounts. When you upgrade a ship, you can also get discounts. You see where I'm going with this? Yes, that's right, there were no minimum costs for an upgrade, so it can go down into the negatives. It gets worse when you realize that switching a section type technically makes the upgrade cost for such section free. Combined with discounts, this exploit can give you an infinite amount of alloys for basically no effort at all. These exploits on top of one another slowly got patched over time as Paradox wised up with finally putting in a minimum upgrade cost for everything. There was even another exploit where you could cancel contracts with mercenaries that you own and have hired yourself to basically convert influence directly into energy. Mercenary enclaves need to compensate their customers when they suddenly need to cancel a contract per request by the owner. Well, you are the owner. And don't even get me started on that godforsaken Spiffing Brit video. If there ever was an infinite energy exploit, then that would be it, where you buy and sell energy for even more energy? How is that even possible? You can do this sorcery yourself by just clicking on the energy icon and then repeatedly clicking the buy and sell until your energy goes into an overflow error. It's called black magic for a reason. It just works. On the topic of infinite energy, how about we talk about some netcode exploits? Did you know that playing Shoulders of Giants give you dig sites that spawn more dig sites? What if you combine this with a lot of lag in multiplayer? Well, you could apparently spawn an infinite number of dig sites. I thought it was normal since I always had terrible internet. Playing on a Wi-Fi that has barely 3 megabits per second is indeed concerning. If you don't know what that means, then don't worry. It just means absolutely terrible. And made me have a habit of spamming buttons on menus so they go away faster. I did the same for when finishing dig sites, and it just made a million dig sites spawn in the same game tick as a result, in which you can finish them all individually and then sell for a ludicrous amount of energy each. I guess the devs never took into account a scenario where a chronic lagger would be spamming an interaction multiple times in a single second, which, I mean, is fair. Playing a Paradox game with more than 100 ping is masochism. Actually, forget infinite energy credits by buying and selling them, because you can just make profits the old-fashioned way: insider trading. At some point, if you buy and sell a resource in bulk repeatedly, you'll actually start getting a profit. I think this is actually caused by a strange rounding error that can also be encountered when you auto-sell specifically 3 food. With 30% market fee, this results in 3 food being worth 2.1 energy. But due to rounding, the actual result is just giving you 3 energy. It was actually extremely common to see people with a macro to spam out sell orders to abuse this rounding mechanic, since you basically sell food at 0% market fee. Heck, you could even do this with the other resources. Now, if you want to hear something even more strange, at some point when you auto buy too much, the market prices don't actually change. It was very confusing, but all we know is that setting a giant auto buy order at a certain time near the update of the month bugs out the price increase system so it doesn't update. The only way to break this is to buy or sell. This led to absurd situations where you can just buy literally thousands of resources at dirt cheap prices for the entire game. Alright, to cleanse the palate after the absurdity just now, time for some rapid fire iceberg facts. You used to be able to upgrade your ships on allied star bases. Now you can't. Reinforcing and then immediately deleting a fleet results in a million one-ship fleets. Take note on how deleting a fleet can be from battle or complete player incompetence. Fleet combat visuals are just there for show. The actual combat simulation is wildly different. Sector automation was so bad that Paradox actually removed the mechanic entirely. Now it's just plain old automation again. And yes, I met the time where you could make sectors autonomous and you have to give resources into sector storage for the AI to build for you. Extremely counterintuitive and confusing. Depth of the iceberg. Why is Xeno compatibility so hated? No, it's not because of the sus ethic, maybe, but in general, people hate it because it breaks the game, and not in a good way. Xeno compatibility works by making species crossbreed with one another to make a subspecies, in which the subspecies can also intermingle with one another to make other subspecies. See where I'm going with this? The issue lies in that there is no limit to this. Heck, the species pie chart will straight up stop working because there aren't enough colors for the game to use. Or worse yet, the game would be able to handle the potentially thousands of subspecies and just stop working. Thus, people hate this perk, and rightfully so. Nowadays, Paradox fixed this so that there's a soft cap mechanic that stops the insane levels of crossbreeding possible before. The stigma still stayed though. You'll get cyberbullied if you pick this perk. In the old days, there's also a scrap mechanic for minefields, where your ships will take damage over time when in range. Roughly similar to the Zroni Stormcaster and Bulwark disintegrators we have now, except more concentrated and lethal. I haven't heard of this thing being mentioned anywhere else really. After further investigation, it seems to be around in the prehistoric 1.0 era. It sounds like a pretty cool concept. Maybe an expansion focusing on this would be added one day. I also have to mention how having these aura indicators could also be useful for seeing what your fleet's weapon ranges are. But no, they had to scrap it forever for no reason. Like seriously, there's the code, there's the unused assets. Why is it not used? It would be such a nice quality of life feature, especially for newer players. On the topic of unused assets, did you know that for some odd reason, there's an alloy icon that's higher resolution and more detailed? Perhaps too detailed, as 5 months later, it was promptly replaced with a frankly lower detailed asset. Actually, we can see the same for food, minerals, and energy as well. Except these 3 icons have so many versions, it's very hard to pinpoint when these are actually used. But we can see that the upload date for all 3 are pretty much the same, so we can surmise that it's probably related to some seasonal event or something. If we delve even deeper and look into the console edition for Stellaris, everything just has better art, text, weapons, traditions, even ascension perks. Literally everything is prettier. My question is, why is this not in the normal base game? I understand visual consistency is important through versions, but come on, look at this comparison. Again and again and again. Some can be construed to be an artistic choice, but some are just straight up better. Like Tech Ascendancy here looks so much cooler in console. I bet you they're gonna sell this as an enhanced art expansion pack or something. I just know it. My spidey senses are tingling. Also, the countless unused strategic resources. Some did get implemented back in the day as things that give you empire bonuses when in your control. But at some point, basically everything got scrapped in favor of the system we have today. Although some of these are never actually implemented, so there's not much documentation left other than the fact that some are basically reskins of one another. There were also things I haven't mentioned, like the plethora of government types, but there's just too many. I guess they wanted to streamline it, as too much customization in a way can also be bad, as it can lead to confusion. Though I have no idea why they removed collectivist and individualist ethics. They would have been pretty cool. I have also found a rather arcane no texture model. When you delete the ship texture files, you'll get a rather strange looking box. Why does this look so familiar? Very funny when you equip them, as your empire will look like some kind of cognito hazard. You could safely assume that the game was full of those weird boxes when in development. I guess that's where the inspiration came for death cubes for the Crisis Empires. Some poor dev is probably so traumatized from having to work on the game while looking at cubes all day, so they decided to make it a real feature. Real Stellaris lore. Genius is a term used when something sounds so stupid that it actually works. Did you know that you can actually manipulate ship combat behavior by changing the order you put your weapons in? I know, that sounds so stupid. When you put the exact same designs up one another, there is a distinct difference in how they behave depending on the order you put your weapons in. Apparently, the game has been lying to us all this time. When you use artillery computers, you don't actually use the longest range weapons as an anchor. It literally just uses the middle number. So, depending on how you order things, you can either make your destroyers kite on 30 range or 100. Now, unfortunately, it seems to not work for cruisers and battleships, as the order of your ship sections depend on the order of how you put them in, which is usually from the front to back. Wait, what if we use the same logic on this too? We select the middle section first, and then the front section, and then the back section. Oh god, oh... It's actually working. The median is now the X slots. Basically, the order in which component and ship sections are placed matter. Because when a computer says median, it doesn't mean median, as in the weapon's range from highest to lowest, but instead median as in the most literal sense. The weapon that's in the middle of the ship physically in the component order is the median. How is this even a thing? When you make a new fleet, you can simply make a new ship design completely empty, right? You select the middle first, and then the front, and then the back. You can even either make the ship hover on short or long range by just emptying some slots in the front or back of the order. The logic is that in the actual game code, the written order in which everything is read through is easily manipulated and reordered. For example, in destroyers, you can actually order things wrong if you select the back section first, as the order here is actually reversed compared to normal, where you put the sections front to back. How did I know of this arcane black magic, you ask? Well, someone basically shared this random Reddit thread explaining the entire exploit. At first, I refused to believe it, but after some testing, this crap actually works on the most recent Stellaris version. Just to put a perspective on how absurd this is, it just means that ship designs has been fundamentally broken for basically the entire game's history. From the red laser meta to this, it just feels like we've come full circle. I understand that the combat visuals in the game is mostly there for flavor, for us players to gawk and feast our eyes to. But the combat simulations where stuff like these are done is not shown, which can cause some insane discoveries 8 years into the game's lifetime. Conclusion: there is some irony in the seesaw game of meta shifts and exploits. After going through the rabbit hole that is old Stellaris, I've come to the critical conclusion that it's basically just as messed up as new Stellaris. The meta just changes. The way it's messy is just how it always is. It's a paradox game. It'll always be broken. That's why every Paradox game's multiplayer and single-player communities uses copium and mods to either balance or add content to the game. Although there were many Stellaris balance mods, none stood the test of time. The strangest part is, it's only true for Stellaris. There are many multiplayer balance and content mods for other Paradox games that lasted for ages. What made Stellaris different then? Why didn't any balance mods survive? Pretty sure it's not a community-sized issue either, so what gives? You could say that every update of Paradox games make them a slightly different, broken game, while every update of Stellaris make it an entirely different, broken game. The game changes faster than a mod team could ever hope to keep up. This is also even more true in recent times, as there has been a complete slew of completely game-changing reworks, sometimes back-to-back in the span of 3 months. I've known many developers of very popular and expensive mods lose their minds or get completely burnt out having to deal with patching their heartily crafted creations. Just for reference, the recent few updates basically broke mod stability so much that it causes constant crashes in both single player and multiplayer. These devs are people that love the game so much that they create content worth multiple full-price DLCs. Their passion to create content for others and themselves seem to ring hollow though, as instead now they're forced to patch the disastrous backend every other patch or so. I hope this video encapsulates the game's life cycle throughout the years, and perhaps even give light to a rather dark age in Stellaris history. I had to interview some Stellaris boomers for their experiences, as most of this stuff is never really put into writing. There are likely many more things to talk about that I don't even know of, so write down some of your strangest Stellaris facts down in the comments. As we all experience the game differently, it would be very interesting to hear your side of Stellaris history, as this is the Stellaris Iceberg Explained.